Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our first forum to meet and get to know Dr. Timothy Chandler, Senior Associate Provost at Kent State University, Kent, Ohio. I am Elba Maldonado Colon, Chair of Elementary Education and Chair of the Provost Search Committee. Before we proceed with the agenda, I would like to share the process for this session and what follows. After short, brief remarks, Dr. Chandler will make a presentation for about 10 minutes. This will be followed by questions from the audience for about 40 minutes. We have 2 microphones, so you can come to the microphones or we can take the microphones to you. After we are through with the Q&A, you could provide feedback to the committee through one of 2 opportunities: completing the written form that you have received, and turning it in at the exit, or you can go to the Provost Search link that is on our SJSU's homepage and do one of the entries in there. Sorry. If you complete the paper form here today, there will be 2 persons with a box collecting the feedback at the doors. Feedback collected will be studied and considered by the committee as we engage in deliberations on the afternoon of November 22nd, and you will have until noon, November 22nd, to provide feedback. We're scheduled to meet with President Kayumi on the following Wednesday for recommendations, and that is on November 23rd. Back to Dr. Chandler. Dr. Chandler is Senior Associate Provost at Kent State University. He received his doctorate from Stanford University in education, and his published work centers on sports and history. Many of Dr. Chandler's professional experiences are common to San Jose State. He oversees many large, complex departments. He is involved in strategic planning. Dr. Chandler was Dean at Kent State of the College of Arts, and he has been involved with fundraising. And Dr. Chandler has co-authored 5 books and multiple chapters and articles. Let's welcome Dr. Chandler.
Thank you, Elba, very much. I see the rules of engagement don't change. It's come early and get a seat at the back. Very good plan. Shirley, how are you? Nice to see you. Thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate this very much. It's a real pleasure to be back in this area. It's been a long time. Let me do 3 things. Let me just talk a little bit about my background. Let me make some comments as to why I think that might be valuable background, and then perhaps we can get into some questions and you can make me feel grim and miserable up here. I grew up in England, as you might have guessed from my accent. I spent the first 20-odd years of my life there. Taught in the English schools for a while, and then realized that I knew absolutely nothing and felt it was perhaps time to go back to graduate school. So I went to graduate school in Canada for a couple of years. It was a good decision. I met my wife there, and we then came down to Stanford to do a PhD. I spent 7 years in upstate New York, realizing that having moved from here to there, that the weather really can be very miserable in upstate New York, and shoveling one's driveway every day in January and February became just par for the course, and it was probably time to move somewhere a little warmer. So I spent the last 20 years in Kent, Ohio, doing a variety of jobs in that time. I went to run a program and ended up as a department chair, and then an associate dean, and then a dean, and now the senior associate provost. And you know how we are for acronyms in higher education. You can work out and what the Senior Associate Provost is called on my campus. And sometimes I'm called the Big Sap, not just the Sap. Please, come on down to the front. I'm going to do what you do to your students. Why here, why now? My offspring are finally, at least one of them is off the payroll. I'm very much hoping the other one will be off the payroll very soon. And so I'm perhaps in a position where I think it would be nice to take on a new challenge. And this looks like a very interesting challenge. I'm attracted by the climate and the location, and I don't just mean meteorologically when I talk about the climate, the culture of the place. Some of the faculty members that I know who have been here a long time and have said to me, this is a wonderful place. They even say it on the website, some of them, that this is a wonderful place to be. Certainly talking with the search committee and talking with some of your students, it's a warm and welcoming place, and that's an attractive thing to me. You value undergraduate education highly. That's something of great interest to me. There's going to be a push, I understand, from the President to increase scholarship and look at external funding and trying to relate more to your neighbors here in Silicon Valley. And I think that's obviously a tremendous advantage that you have. There is only one Silicon Valley, and you're right in it. And you've supplied the workforce for that place for a very long time. They ought to be giving back as much as you're giving to them. That requires some more relationship building. I think that would be an interesting thing to be doing. What do I bring? I hope I bring a sense of humor, but more importantly than that, I think I bring a range of experience that goes back 25 years at all levels of the institution, from a beginning faculty member right the way through to the Senior Associate Provost working in the Provost's office. I've been a dean, and I've been a dean in a college where I haven't been a faculty member. And that sounds a rather strange situation, but we unpacked your equivalent of applied science and arts. We had a college that we called Fine and Professional Arts, that really was called politely the College of Everything Else. And one of the jobs that I had as the Dean of Fine and Professional Arts was actually to unpack that college and create 4 colleges or 3 colleges out of one, College of Architecture and Environmental Design. We pulled that out. A College of Communication and Information, and we pulled that out. We took my school, Exercise, Leisure and Sport, Speech Pathology and Audiology and Family Consumer Studies, and put those in with the College of Education and made a College of Education, Health and Human Services. And what was left were the arts, fashion, music, theatre, art, dance, and our museum. And rather than move with my own unit, the arts folks asked if I would stay on and be their dean, which is an honour for someone who is about as unartistic as you can imagine. But it was a very good experience for me. You learn what it's like to work in someone else's world, be responsible for that world, and I think it'll prove to be, it's been very good training to be the Senior Associate Provost, and I think it will be good training to be a Provost, because most provosts obviously are dealing with academic units that are not their own, and they're expected to understand it and make something of it. And I think that's been very good training for me for this position. What do I find attractive about the place? From what I've understood, and it's not totally apparent from your website, although I've dug through a lot of it, it does seem that the mission of the place is in keeping. The values of the place are the kind of values that I think are important and I feel very much in keeping with. But now probably it's time for you to ask me some questions so that you can find out whether I'm telling the truth. But more importantly, to see what I need to know from you. It'll be helpful. I see this as a conversation as much as a question and answer session. So please feel free to come to the mic and ask your questions. Hello.
I'm Jan Shaw. I'm in journalism.
Never mind. I won't hold it against you. Go on.
Okay, I have a question written out. San Jose State has a risk-averse, rather entrenched bureaucracy that makes it very difficult to get anything done, let alone sort of innovate. Have you ever tackled such a culture? And if so, what was the outcome?
Thank you for the question. I think by definition, institutions of higher education are conserving. I think it's one of their characteristics, one of their rather nice characteristics in some ways. And so, yes, I think risk-averse is something that is not unusual. I would describe my own institution as fairly risk-averse. And one of the things that we have done to try to change that is to alter the budgetary system. So you have to find incentives to get people to change behaviors and incentivize people to do the things that you want them to do. And we have done that in a number of ways. We've asked faculty to do things such as increase technological elements in their courses, build online elements, to create a change in the way we do things. So we've incentivized. In terms of the bureaucracy, which is the other side of that,
Sort of the non-faculty, all of
yes. And one of the on the other side of the house, on the administrative side of the house, we have actually tried to change a number of our processes, and we've held Kaizen events where we have mapped every single process and worked out where there are pieces in that process that are absolutely useless and a waste of time, where there's no value added to certain activities. We actually have a team of people who do this. We call them our Tiger team. We employ a former professor of business, our Goodyear professor of business, who worked for Booz Allen and was a management consultant for many years. He handpicked 3 people from within the university, and we gave him the task of doing task analysis on many of our procedures, not all of them, but many of them. And we pulled everybody in, so he's looked at the registrar's office, he's looked at the bursar's office, and we have literally retooled all of those activities by mapping out what we do and working out where there is no value added in those activities. So his notion was, as a management consultant, is that over a course of time, we build layer upon layer. And our need is to strip those layers down again, find out what's essential, and give up on the other activities that are part of that. Follow up.
Would you be willing to try something like that?
Absolutely. I think we have to be. If we are really, truly going to serve our students, we have to have systems that support what they need to get done. I'd hate the term customer service applied to an institution, but somewhere along the way, you know and I know that nothing will make you more angry than calling AT&T or Verizon and being told to hold. And our students go to the bursar's office and they get the runaround. They have to go from here to here to here to here because that's how we've set the process up to suit ourselves. We haven't said this is about serving our students as well as possible. And so I would be more than happy to bring my friend Greg Hackett and his Tiger team and approach processes in the way that we have done. I think it's proved incredibly successful. We are much leaner, much more efficient, We have much better control over the processes because we've technologized many of them, and we've created space for the people to do the things that they need to do, as opposed to filling in forms, signing forms, or whatever it is. So, very long answer to a short question. So we're done? Please. Professor Peter, come to the microphone. But start on this side first, if we may.
I'm from the College of Engineering, and as you may have discovered in searching our website, our graduation rates leave something to be desired on campus. And there's many, many factors involved.
Absolutely.
We can start with kindergarten and move through every office on campus. So it's a very complicated problem. What experience have you had in tackling that issue, that type of issue on your campuses?
I'm forced to say that it is my current responsibility. Retention and graduation rates, student success, is one of my major responsibilities. So we have looked at a number of things. We blame the high schools because we don't think they're doing a great job. We're very good at that. We're very good at pointing the finger. But we've got to find ways of making sure that our students are ready. And if they're not ready, we need to make them ready when we get here. If we're willing to take their money, we better be willing to make sure that they can be successful. So we've worked very hard on who we take and what they're able to do, and we've started to work on the areas that they seem to have the most problems in, which for us has been mathematics and writing. We're currently working on a math emporium. We've just started a math emporium. I don't know whether you're familiar with a math emporium, but Alabama, Illinois, Virginia Tech have decided that they want to put, and they have put, and we've taken the whole floor of the library, we've taken all the books out, we've put 120 computer stations in there, and we have tutors and faculty working with students on the ALEX program. I think some of you know what the ALEX program is. And we found that the characteristics of that program are incredibly helpful in terms of student success. It's self-paced learning to some degree. It offers immediate and regular and constant and appropriate feedback. And it's test-heavy. Students are tested over and over again. Those characteristics are things that we have to translate from that environment to all that we do if we really want learning to be effective and efficient for our students. So we're looking at math. That was the biggest. About 40% of our students fail every math course. Well, if you can't get through math and it's a requirement for graduation, you're not going to have a very good graduation rate. So that's where we've started. So I would want to look at your data. I would want to say, okay, where are students having difficulties? Is it in math and is it in writing? And my guess is it is. I don't know that, but that would be my guess. And we'd start there with the data and say, what do we need to do? We've been supplying a lot more support for our students who are struggling in terms of tutors, in terms of mandatory advising, in terms of not allowing students to experiment for too long. They have to declare a major after they've taken 45 hours. If they haven't, they're not allowed to do anything until they've spent time with an advisor. So we're trying to limit them. We've put in place a very powerful, I think, graduation planning system, which is all online, and they have to put their plan in place before they can enroll and before they can enroll for new courses. So we're trying to control the situation and force them in some ways to be responsible for their own learning and for their own planning. What we haven't been able to do yet is to look at the students' goals. We're setting all of the goals. Retention, graduation, they're our terms. They're not the students' terms. They're the things that the institution worries about for its own well-being. What we haven't done is to spend enough time with students asking them what their goals are and helping them plan out their goals so that they can graduate and meet our goals, but those are mutually beneficial situations. We haven't done that yet. That would be the next piece for me. Short answer, sorry.
Well, Dr. Chandler, thank you for being with us today. I would like you to comment on your experience in collegial governance at Kent State or other institutions. We have kind of an unusually cooperative relationship here. As our provost, you would be a sitting member of our academic senate with a vote and the ability to speak on issues. We've prided ourselves on trying to bring about changes in university policy through the cooperation of this Senate, which has students and faculty and administrators on it. But we also are aware that most universities don't have that particular kind of institution which shares governance between the administration and the faculty in quite that way. So what has been your experience, and what would you do to try to foster that degree of shared governance and collegiality and transparency that we value here?
Thank you for the question. I'm almost staggered by your Senate structure, that it is as inclusive as it is. We have a Senate at Kent which is faculty only. Administrators are ex officio, so we're there, but we don't vote. The Faculty Senate is purely advisory on many issues, and so there is not really what I would consider truly shared governance. I obviously need to learn more about your model, but from what I understand, it fulfills one of my most important notions about decision-making, and that is that there is wisdom in diverse crowds, or pluralistic crowds. And for me, the more voices there are at the table, the better the decisions that you're likely to make in the long run. So for me, the sound of your Senate and its structure and the way in which it works is actually a breath of fresh air, considering what I've been used to. And I do believe in the value of shared governance. I think it's incredibly important that shared governance is both valued and adhered to. So for me, I would hope to be a big participant in that process. You talk about transparency. For me, I don't know what your current provost does in terms of keeping you informed as to what he's thinking and whether it all comes through the Senate and that process. But I would expect to be in contact with you on a regular basis through a monthly newsletter or other things that would let you know what I'm thinking and what I think the university should be trying to do. And I would expect you to respond to that. It would be an open forum, so to speak. I don't know enough about the Senate structure and the way in which it works, other than looking at it on paper. I haven't experienced it, and I think it would be an interesting thing to experience, certainly in contrast to ours, which tends to be somewhat conflictual and at loggerheads, I'm sorry to say.
Well, as a presidential scholar once said, what you see depends upon where you sit. And so sometimes, even though we have a collegial relationship, a member of the administration sees things in a different way than the Senate would see them. It sounds as if at Kent State you've had a number of those situations where you've been at loggerheads.
Yep.
Could you talk about what you've been able to do to transcend those differences when they occur?
Conversation is absolutely key for me, discussion and conversation. I was talking this morning about, I was asked the question as to tell me your most difficult decision and whose life you ruined in doing that. And I was talking about the hiring of a faculty member with tenure, which is very unusual for us. And I made the point that it ended up as a legal case, in fact. It was settled out of court, and everybody, I think, ended up fine. But I think what I failed to do, because of the timing of that decision, was to spend enough time talking about, with the faculty in a particular unit, why I thought this was a very important decision and why I thought it was necessary to make it. They were advisory. I got to make the decision as the dean. But if I'd had more time and been able to discuss it, I think it might have been an easier situation to deal with. So for me, it's about, you talk about transparency. How do you create transparency? Regular discussions, opportunities to talk, both formally and informally. And I think informal discussion is just as vital as formal discussion. And I would expect, although I wouldn't have the time, I still try to employ an open door policy. And I would be willing to log time, whether it's walking across campus or whatever. My current boss actually allows faculty, says you can book an appointment with me, I'll be walking from A to B and I'll be willing to talk with you during that walk. I'd be willing to do that. I think we have to use our time as effectively as we can. But it's about the conversation. It's got to be about the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I forced several of my students to be here to ask questions. So I think I need to be a role model, ask the first question so my student can come and ask questions. I'm looking at them. Okay.
No pressure, people, no pressure.
So my question is very, very short. Why is diversity, multiculturalism is valuable in a higher education system?
Let me use a biological metaphor. An ecological system which lacks diversity is going to die. I don't see how our world will be any different.
Thank you. I still encourage my students.
Sir, tell me who you are.
I'm Peter Brzezinski. I've been here on this campus since Abraham Lincoln was president. And I certainly welcome your sense of humor here. The reason for my question is, and it concerns me greatly, is that from what I know about higher education, and I think I'm pretty well informed, the system here in California, in the CSU, which began with the master plan of 1960, which was a fabulous plan. But since that time, a bureaucracy has been established and grown in Long Beach. And today there is a chancellor, whom very few of us like.
Just let me make a note of that.
A board of trustees that I believe pretty much agrees with whatever the chancellor decrees. And consequently, the campus presidents are rather limited in their authority. And as you go down to the provost, etc., you have less and less and less power. That is not the normal pattern, as I understand it, in higher education across the country, both private and public institutions. And so I'm just wondering, if you were chosen here and you have these marvelous ideas and you find yourself constrained by campus and chancellor's office constraints, how would you be able to react, and would your spirit be so diminished within a short period of time that you would wish to retire?
That has got to be the most uplifting question I've been asked in a very long time. I fear, however, there is a reality behind your statement. And to be quite honest, I don't know how I would respond. I can be feisty and I can be difficult and I can try and charm people and be humorous, but who knows what the real leeway is that you will have. I've said all along that I know the CSU system from outside, and reading about it, but that's not the lived reality that presidents and provosts obviously have. To be quite honest, it is one of the things that will cause me to pause a little as I think about this position. That's not to say that it will deter me, but obviously from what you've said and from what I've learned from being here, I'm going to need, or whoever takes this job is going to need some real inner fortitude and backbone in order to be able to take on some of these very important issues. I would, however, be interested in sending my friend, the Goodyear professor, to talk to the folks at CSU Central about perhaps unpacking some of their processes and thinking again about peeling the onion back a little bit. I don't think that would go down very well, probably, but I think we all need to think about re-engineering our processes. I really do. It's something that I think is incredibly important if we're going to be really cutting edge in 21st century in our thinking. And we need to think about this as a country. You know, and I know, that around the world, other places are developing institutions of higher education that will continue to challenge us, and whether or not you like the idea of world rankings of institutions, they're out there, and people are looking, and people are taking note of those rankings. And while the US still dominates those rankings, it doesn't dominate them in the way that it used to. And one wonders, if you look at our high school rankings against other parts of the world, what those rankings may look like in 15 and 20 years' time. So I think we need to be looking at ourselves, and we need to be looking at the system and saying to the system, help us continue to be competitive and doing the things that we need to do to build the kind of world we want in the 21st century. Thanks. Hello.
Hi, Dr. Chandler. I'm Cindy from the Disability Resource Center. Welcome to San Jose State.
Thank you for what you do.
I actually have 2 questions. Thank you. How do you see academic affairs and the Division of Student Affairs working together? That's my first question.
As well as possible.
Okay. Good.
I actually have made this point before. For those of you who have heard it, we have set up a world, and here, I don't know how it works here, but certainly on my own campus and in a lot of other campuses, we have academic affairs and we have student affairs. And the lived experience of our students is that we have bifurcated their world. This is not a good thing to do. So for me, one of the things I would like to work on very hard that I think is incredibly important is to try to bring those two things together, so that the lived experience of our students and our faculty and our staff is that those things are not separate worlds, but they're integrated and well-organized and mutually supportive.
And I agree.
I'll take your vote. Thank you very much.
And my second question is, you mentioned ALEX, the math program.
Yes.
So ALEX is not accessible. I don't know if you know that.
I do, actually, and we've had some very interesting discussions with McGraw-Hill,
Okay.
and they have actually agreed to help us make that accessible
Okay.
in terms of video and other pieces that can help explain that stuff to students. Now, it's a year away, but we have actually been able to persuade them that this is unacceptable under ADA and they need to be doing more.
So thank you for that. My question is, what are you doing presently for students who can't access ALEX?
We have set up a system of individual tutors for those folks. There are only, I think I'm right in saying there are only 5 students at the moment who are doing that. Don't quote me on that, please, but I think that's right. And so we've set up individual sessions with them, but it's not good enough. I mean, if we believe that the technology is really helping, and all we're doing is going back to the old technology, then we're failing. So we're working on this right now. It's a huge problem. You know much more about it than I do.
Very big.
But it is a very, very big problem. And we've got all the technology that you can think of, trying to help students, but still, this one we haven't conquered. And maybe I can have a conversation with you afterwards, because this is something that has been on my plate and that I've been trying to deal with. But at the moment, it's taking on the power and might of McGraw-Hill to try to get them to do the right thing. And that's not easy when their bottom line is all they worry about.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
Welcome to San Jose State.
Thank you.
I'm Bob Rucker from Journalism and Mass Communications. You mentioned a wonderful quote about diversity, and I want to get back to that in part two of my question. But in part one, it has to do with fundraising. You are identified as being a good fundraiser or experienced with fundraising. How do we fundraise in the Silicon Valley to enable this campus to be the heart of Silicon Valley by using new technology in all of our fields, not just the obvious ones?
Why don't you try another question? I don't like that one.
Sure.
No, I'm serious. Ultimately, fundraising is really about friend raising. And it's really about relationship building. So how do you go about building relationships that can help you achieve what it is you're looking to achieve, which is to technologize across the board or whatever it is, but also how do you make that something of value to the partner with whom you are building that relationship? And what we end up having to do is to find the win-wins in those enterprises. In my limited past of doing this, I've been very fortunate in that I've been able to find people who have wanted to have input to what we do on our campus, who have wanted to give back because they feel they've had a great experience, and they can see that by partnering, they can have a much bigger impact than they can as an individual who's not connected just by giving money or whatever it is. So we've worked very hard at building those kind of relationships. You have fueled Silicon Valley for a long time. You have students who've gone from here who are littered throughout Silicon Valley. What are they doing to give back? You've just started your first campaign. You've been very successful. Why have you been successful? I think you've been successful because people have had a great experience here. Long may that continue. That is the single most important thing that you can do. This is a long-term effort. Fundraising is not a short-term game. It's a very long-term goal. So continue to work hard with your students. Make their experience here great. They will want to give back. You need to talk to them about giving back. You need to talk to them about giving back. It should be a requirement.
Interesting. How about question two?
Remind me what that was. Will I like that one more than the first one?
Probably not.
Go ahead.
You mentioned diversity. That was a
Yes.
beautiful quote that you gave about diversity. And you're looking at the first African-American director of the School of Journalism and Mass Communications, which I feel honored to be, but I'm a little disappointed that it took so long. Could you address the issue of retention and promotion of diverse cultures and life experiences on this campus? How would you go about that?
First of all, I think there has to be an absolute institutional commitment, and that needs to be publicly made. And you do that by saying, here are the measures that we will use. Do you have a scorecard? Do you have some kind of diversity scorecard? I've read your diversity report. It talks about pluralism, which I think is a much more advanced way of thinking about diversity. We think still, on my campus, still think about diversity. But what we have done is to appoint a vice president for diversity, equity, and inclusion, which signals a lot about the institution's motives and desires. So that's the first thing. If you're serious, put your money where your mouth is. Let's have someone who comes to work every day whose absolute thinking is about that issue. And they're then responsible for faculty diversity, student diversity, creating opportunities for people. Somebody has to have that as their primary goal. We can ask deans to do it, we can ask vice presidents in other fields to do it, to worry about it. But ultimately, you have to have a champion, and you have to have someone who takes responsibility for that. It took us, I appointed the first African-American director of the School of Music at Kent. Now, you would have thought that that would not have been a difficult thing to do, given our very strong jazz program, given all sorts of other things. I actually had to reject the nominations from the faculty in order to get that to happen, because there was no institutional commitment to it. It wasn't easy to do. So I would ask, first and foremost, is this campus really serious about it? Are you willing to pay for somebody to come to work every day to worry about that? And if you are, let's get on and do it. If you're not, it says something about the campus.
Are you ready for the next question? No.
I'm not sure. Ask it. Yes, of course. Tell me who you are.
I'm Mary Warner.
And what do you do, Mary?
I'm in the Department of English and Comparative Literature, and I also work with English education. And so I have a couple things. You talked about we haven't really focused on, or maybe we haven't focused on asking our students what their goals are. One goal for them often is graduation.
Absolutely.
And one challenge we are continuing to experience is the inability to offer the courses to be able to let them graduate in a timely manner. And that relates to not having the faculty that we need, and we haven't been able to hire, or we get very minimal. I'm in a department that continues to have fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer tenure line faculty, and then the workload increases, and then we often can't do what we want to do for our students. So I would just like to have you talk about how you see addressing in the CSU system, which is as challenged as it is, regarding support for faculty hires, and then for the opportunities for our students to be able to get the classes they need to get.
I'm not sure I know how to answer that question, because I'm not sure I know how easy or difficult it is to hire faculty if it is really that limited. But let me tell you what I've tried to do in the past and how I think about that issue. The first thing is that if we make a promise to a student, we take out a contract with them in some ways when they sign on with us, and we say, it is possible for you to graduate from here in 4 years if you do these things, then we have to fulfill our side of that promise. And if we're not doing it, then we better go and find out a way to get it done. The question tends to have become, at least on our campus, how can we do this within the budgetary constraints that we have, which means that the number of part-time faculty on our campus has been growing rapidly, the number of tenure-track faculty members has been reduced, and we have a third category of non-tenure-track full-time faculty, some of whom are purely researchers, clinical faculty, some of whom are purely teachers, teaching 15 credit hours a semester. Some of those teachers are terrific. Some of those people are absolutely outstanding, and I would hate to lose them. We need to evaluate them. We need to help them become more professional. We need to encourage them to continue to be scholarly in their own way. But maybe there are ways of finding a balance between tenure track and non-tenure track that still fulfills the mission of the university, still enables the students to graduate on time because those faculty tend to teach more and we don't have to worry so much about their research time. Maybe we can then, within our budget, take care of that need for more courses to help students graduate. English is tough to do online. I'm not sure that it can't be done, though. Depends what the course is. But have we looked at other alternatives? Are there other ways of delivering? We've actually been forcing our faculty to think about larger classes. And I think that's legitimate, provided. I think it's legitimate provided we can continue to have the level of student engagement that we need to be successful and that students can be successful in their learning. Class size is a proxy. It's a proxy for the level of engagement. I can't teach more than 20 people in this class. I can't get enough discussion or whatever it is. Class size is a proxy. Let's not be fooled by that. It's a proxy for student engagement. So how can we ensure more engagement, even in larger classes? And technology can help us with that. Hybrid classes can help us with that. But we also know that those online classes take more time, are more expensive, but we can serve more students and we can be more effective if we're using those technologies well. So there is no easy answer to your question. I think there are a number of areas that we need to look at, but I do believe that if we say to a student, you can graduate in 4 years, we have to make it possible. We are morally obligated to make it possible. If we say we're willing to take your money at the door, we have to do that. We've got to find ways, and there aren't easy ways, but we've got to find a balance of ways to do that. Hello.
Good morning, Dr. Chandler. My name is Natalie King. I work with Faculty Affairs. Could you comment on any experience you have with collective bargaining agreements? Because as you know, we have many on this campus, including a faculty collective bargaining agreement.
We're actually right in the middle of our collective bargaining right now. And for those of you who follow politics across the country, you'll know that Wisconsin has just given up collective bargaining rights, and Ohio actually almost gave up collective bargaining rights, but did not. My actually direct input to the collective bargaining is actually very limited. I live in a collective bargaining environment and have done for 20 years. As a dean, I understand what that means. As a provost, someone working in the provost office, I understand what that means. Have I sat at the table and done the bargaining? No, I have not. My colleague, Associate Provost Sue Averill, does that. We all participate in terms of strategies and what we think are the important things for us to put on the table, but I have not sat at the table. We have 3 unions on our campus. They all have different bargaining agreements. Our tenure-track faculty have an agreement, our non-tenure-track faculty have a separate agreement, and then our ASME people have their own agreement. And we have a lot of non-unionized folks who I think are probably the lowest paid and the least well taken care of. What a surprise. But no, I hope that answers your question. Limited experience, but I live with it, so to speak, all the time. Thank you. Can I go home yet? Other questions, please.
Jerry Flanter with Graduate Studies and Research. So the climate is such, as you know, that more and more is expected of faculty to get involved in research engagement, not only for themselves but for their students, not only for their own interests but for the community. Yet the teaching load is very heavy, and the research funds to buy out time is not there very much. What's been your experience and what would you recommend?
Our experience is not terribly different from that. What we have decided to try to do is to focus our efforts on areas in which we think we can be successful, both in terms of attracting funding, external funding, but also where we have critical masses of faculty who have interests that are similar, so we can put together research teams. We're trying to not eliminate, but reduce the number of N's of one in terms of research enterprises, and particularly if they're areas that the university wants to pursue rather than an individual has an interest in. We've tried to encourage and we've tried to incentivize people to work in those groups, and we have bought out their time for proposal writing and other things. The other thing we've done is to hire in a coordinated fashion. And what we've asked of faculty groups and deans is to send us proposals for hiring 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 people in a particular area that is, we think, meeting the needs of our community, highly fundable, and in which we have real expertise, or will have real expertise if we hire that particular group of people. So we've just hired 5 people in biology, psychology, and liquid crystal science who are doing some very interesting work. We're looking now at a group in sustainability, architecture, water resources, technology, building construction. And what we're trying to do is to put together research teams so that there is the whole in some ways is greater than the sum of those parts. You get a bigger bang for your buck, and you've got a research group that is probably as good, we hope, as anything else around the country, and therefore we can be more competitive for those dollars. So we've said, where are we going to be excellent? Where can we really make a difference? And we've asked that question both internally for ourselves, but also in terms of how it will affect our community, and therefore continue to attract support from outside. And so here, with Silicon Valley, what could you do if you were to think about it in those ways? Who might support these things besides NSF and NIH and all the other funding agencies? Where else might you go? We've just started a College of Public Health, which, if you know anything about Northeast Ohio, our obesity rates, our diabetes rates are absolutely through the roof. This is to serve that community where there's a huge need. We've just taken on 4 or 5 researchers in that area as well. So we've looked at coordinated efforts, focused on particular areas where we think we can be successful, but meet the needs of our community, and therefore we hope we'll get support from more than just federal funding agencies.
Do we have an opportunity for one more question, please?
Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Chandler.
Good morning.
I'm Michael Fallon. I'm a director with our Center for Community Learning and Leadership and a lecturer in sociology. As pedagogy is as inclusive of methodology as it is scholarship, what has been your experience with high-impact practices, and in particular service learning, community engagement?
We have just actually decided that we think service learning is so important that we've mandated it as a graduation requirement. Connecting, helping students connect theory and practice, being part of a community, very, very important. Learning communities, another high-impact practice that we have employed, some of which seem to be more effective than others, seems to be very dependent upon the leadership of the learning community and whether the leader is actually embedded within the community or not. So some of those practices we've looked at, but service learning is a huge part of that. Community engagement for us, very important. We're a public institution. You are a public institution. What are you doing that makes you public? And my president is very fond of saying that our institution is funded by the state at about a 20% level. So he says, we're a private institution 4 days out of 5. Well, I mean, you know, we snigger it, but think about what we're really saying here, which is why fundraising and other things have become so important for us, because we're having to behave like private institutions. And the more we behave like private institutions, the more our students expect us to behave like private institutions, and the more customer-oriented they become. And education becomes a privilege and not a right, etc., etc. So we have worked very hard at that. We believe it, I believe it very strongly, that we must be, we have to be connected to the community, and our students have to be connected to the community. And one of the best ways of doing that is through service learning. It enables them to understand the world in which they're going to be living in the future. It gives them a chance to give back. It gives them a chance to feel connected. It's another way of teaching them to give back.
We want to thank you, Dr. Chandler. Dr. Chandler has to go to other meetings with other groups. So don't forget to give us your feedback, whether today or online, and the deadline is the 22nd. Thank you very much.
Can I thank you all very much for being here? I appreciate your questions. Thank you.